The earthquake that struck Myanmar and Thailand on Friday, March 28, 2025, was one of the most devastating natural disasters in recent history. The powerful magnitude 7.7 quake shook the region, leaving behind widespread destruction, loss of life, and a humanitarian crisis that would take years to recover from. The epicenter of the quake was located near Mandalay, Myanmar's second-largest city, a region already vulnerable due to its location along the Sagang Fault. This fault is a major tectonic boundary where the Indian and Eurasian plates grind against each other, making it one of the most seismically active areas in Southeast Asia. While scientists had long known that this area was at risk for a major earthquake, the sheer scale of the disaster was something that no one could have fully prepared for. As the ground began to shake around midday, panic spread across cities and towns. In Mandalay, centuries-old Buddhist monasteries crumbled, trapping monks and civilians beneath the rubble. A significant portion of the city was reduced to ruins, with an estimated 1/5 of buildings completely destroyed. In Myanmar, a town near the capital, Naypyidaw, dozens of buildings collapsed, including monasteries, where many lives were lost. The effects of the earthquake were not limited to Myanmar. In Thailand's capital, Bangkok, located over 600 miles from the epicenter. The tremors were powerful enough to send people running into the streets. A skyscraper under construction collapsed entirely, leading to multiple fatalities and trapping more than 100 people under debris. Hotels, office buildings, and homes shook violently, with some suffering structural damage that made them unsafe to enter. Beyond the visible destruction, the earthquake's impact on infrastructure was severe. Roads were torn apart by deep fissures, making it nearly impossible for emergency crews to reach affected areas quickly. Bridges collapsed, severing key transportation routes. In Naypyidaw, a 1,000-bed hospital suffered major structural damage, further complicating efforts to treat the wounded. The initial shock was followed by a powerful aftershock and several smaller ones, making rescue efforts even more dangerous. With communications down in many areas, the true extent of the damage was not immediately clear. Reports trickled in of entire villages suffering near total destruction, leaving thousands of people homeless overnight. In the hours following the earthquake, Myanmar's military leader, General Min Aung Hlaing, acknowledged the scale of the disaster, warning that the number of casualties would likely rise. He also made a rare appeal for international assistance, stating that any country willing to help was welcome to do so. Meanwhile, in the United States, President Donald Trump addressed the situation, confirming that his administration would provide aid to Myanmar. The U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, mobilized disaster response teams, offering emergency supplies such as food and clean water. Other countries began to follow suit, but the ongoing conflict in Myanmar complicated relief efforts. The military junta had been struggling to maintain control amid a growing insurgency, and the political instability made it difficult for aid organizations to operate effectively. In the immediate aftermath, search and rescue operations became the top priority. Volunteers and emergency workers raced against time to pull survivors from the wreckage. However, the lack of heavy machinery made the process painfully slow. Many survivors were left trapped under debris, their voices calling out for help as rescuers worked with limited resources. As the first chaotic hours passed, it became clear that this was a disaster unlike any other in recent memory. The people of Myanmar and Thailand were facing not only the destruction of their homes and cities, but also a long and difficult road to recovery. In the coming days, the focus will shift to providing food, water, and medical care to the survivors. But even as relief efforts ramped up, the challenges ahead remained immense. This was only the beginning of the devastating aftermath of the earthquake. In the hours following the earthquake, the full scale of the disaster began to emerge. Emergency response teams in Myanmar and Thailand struggled to navigate the widespread destruction, with blocked roads, damaged bridges, and collapsed buildings, making it difficult to reach those in need. The rescue effort was further complicated by the sheer number of aftershocks, some strong enough to bring down already weakened structures. As the sun set on Friday, March 28, 2025, entire neighborhoods in Mandalay, Myanmar, and surrounding areas remained in ruins, with thousands of people left homeless and desperate for help. Survivors described scenes of chaos and devastation. Many who had fled their homes were now gathered in open spaces, afraid to return indoors. Makeshift camps began to form in parks and fields as people tried to find shelter. Hospitals in Mandalay and other affected cities were overwhelmed, struggling to care for the injured as medical supplies dwindled. In some areas, doctors and nurses were forced to treat patients outside, using whatever resources were available. The earthquake's impact on infrastructure was severe. Power outages left much of Mandalay in darkness, with only emergency generators providing limited electricity. Telecommunications were heavily disrupted, making it difficult for families to check on their loved ones. In Myanmar, where a significant number of buildings had collapsed, rescue workers faced a heartbreaking reality. Many trapped victims could still be heard beneath the rubble, but the lack of proper equipment slowed efforts to reach them. Volunteers and first responders used their bare hands and simple tools to dig through the debris, knowing that time was running out. In Thailand, the destruction was most severe in Bangkok, where the collapse of a high-rise building had already claimed multiple lives. Emergency crews worked tirelessly to search for survivors in the wreckage, while others assessed the damage to surrounding structures. Authorities urged residents to avoid unsafe buildings, fearing further collapses. Despite the destruction, Thailand's emergency response teams were better equipped than those in Myanmar, and international aid began arriving quickly to assist in the relief efforts. As rescue operations continued, the political situation in Myanmar made the crisis even more difficult to manage. The country had already been struggling with instability, and the military leadership faced criticism for its slow response. The junta-controlled state media reported that at least 144 people had been killed, with over 700 injured, though experts feared the true numbers were much higher. Humanitarian organizations struggled to gain access to affected regions, as restrictions on movement and ongoing conflict made relief efforts increasingly complex. Meanwhile, scientists and earthquake experts analyzed the event, confirming that it had occurred along the Sagaing Fault, one of the most active seismic zones in Southeast Asia. The powerful strike-slip movement of the fault had caused intense shaking over a wide area, with damage extending far beyond the immediate epicenter. Seismologists warned that strong aftershocks could continue for days or even weeks, posing further risks to already damaged buildings. The disaster was a stark reminder of the vulnerability of the region to major earthquakes. While Thailand had better infrastructure and emergency preparedness, Myanmar's aging buildings and lack of earthquake-resistant construction had contributed to the high number of casualties. Experts noted that many structures in Mandalay, including monasteries and historical sites, had not been built to withstand such a powerful tremor. As night fell on the first day after the earthquake, the focus remained on saving lives. Rescue workers continued digging through rubble, medical teams treated the injured with limited supplies, and survivors braced for another night of uncertainty. The true extent of the disaster was still unfolding, and the long road to recovery only just begun. As it's only the early hours of the second day since the disaster, the enormity of the crisis became even clearer. Entire neighborhoods throughout the surrounding areas, cities, and towns were reduced to rubble, and the death toll continued to rise as more bodies were pulled from the debris. Emergency workers, many of whom had gone without sleep, pushed forward with rescue efforts despite the overwhelming conditions. The sound of sirens and frantic calls for help filled the air as volunteers and medical teams raced to save lives. Survivors faced worsening conditions as they struggled to find food, clean water, and medical care. The lack of electricity meant that refrigeration was impossible, causing food supplies to spoil quickly. Many were left with only what they had managed to grab before fleeing their homes. Local markets had been destroyed and supply chains were disrupted, making it difficult to bring in fresh goods. Relief organizations tried to set up distribution points, but with damaged roads and limited access, aid was slow to reach those in need. Temporary shelters sprang up in open fields and makeshift camps, where thousands of displaced people gathered in search of safety. These overcrowded conditions raised concerns about sanitation and the potential spread of disease. Without proper facilities, clean water, or medical supplies, illnesses such as diarrhea and respiratory infections began to take hold. Doctors and volunteers worked tirelessly to provide basic care, but the situation was growing worse by the hour. In Bangkok, efforts continued to clear the wreckage of the collapsed high-rise building, where rescuers feared dozens were still trapped. Heavy machinery was brought in to assist, but unstable debris made the work dangerous. Families gathered nearby, anxiously awaiting news of their loved ones. Officials warned that aftershocks could cause further collapses, urging residents to remain cautious. The Thai government had mobilized emergency response teams and was working with international partners to provide aid to affected areas. And back in Myanmar, the situation remained dire. The country's political instability complicated relief efforts with reports of delayed government response and restrictions on foreign aid. Some areas remained completely cut off, with residents forced to rely on community efforts for survival. In Mandalay, religious leaders and local volunteers took the lead in organizing relief efforts, setting up food kitchens and providing temporary shelter in monasteries. International aid organizations struggled to navigate the political barriers, but some managed to deliver much-needed supplies. The United Nations and various humanitarian groups sent shipments of medical supplies, tents, and clean water to the region. The United States Agency for International Development, despite earlier funding cuts, announced that it would be sending disaster response teams to assist. However, logistical challenges made distribution difficult, with damaged roads and collapsed bridges delaying shipments. Seismologists continued to analyze the earthquake, warning that aftershocks could persist for weeks. Many buildings still standing had suffered structural damage, making them unsafe for residents to return. Experts noted that the Sagang Fault had experienced major quakes in the past, but this event was one of the most destructive in recent history. They stressed the need for improved building standards in the region to prevent future disasters from causing similar devastation. Meanwhile, stories of survival and heroism emerged. In one case, a man trapped beneath a collapsed apartment building in Pinmana was rescued after hours of being trapped. He had survived by drinking rainwater that seeped through the wreckage and tapping on metal pipes to signal rescuers. In another, a group of monks helped evacuate dozens of people from a monastery, just minutes before it collapsed. These stories provided moments of hope amid the overwhelming tragedy. As night approached, thousands remained without shelter, and the need for aid grew even more urgent. The region faced a long and difficult recovery, with countless families left grieving and entire communities struggling to rebuild. The days ahead will bring new challenges, but for now, the focus remains on rescuing those still trapped and providing relief to the survivors who had lost everything. In the 9 hours since the powerful earthquake struck Myanmar and Thailand, the region has been thrown into chaos. Rescue operations are still in full force, with emergency teams working tirelessly to pull survivors from the rubble. As the hours pass, the urgency grows. Every minute counts in the search for those still trapped. The damage is extensive, with entire sections of cities reduced to ruins. Streets are filled with dust and debris, making it difficult for rescue vehicles to navigate through the wreckage. In Mandalay, where the destruction is among the worst, emergency workers are struggling to reach people buried beneath collapsed apartment buildings. The sound of heavy machinery fills the air as crews work to clear the debris, but for many, all they can do is wait. Survivors and volunteers have joined the rescue effort, using whatever tools they can find to dig through the wreckage. Some trapped individuals have managed to make contact with rescuers through phone calls or by shouting for help, but many remain silent, their fate unknown. Hospitals are overwhelmed, with doctors and nurses working beyond capacity to treat the injured. Many medical facilities sustained damage in the quake, forcing staff to set up makeshift treatment areas in parking lots and open spaces. Supplies are already running low, and with aftershocks continuing to shake the region, the fear of further collapses is keeping both patients and medical workers on edge. In some areas, the injured are being transported by motorcycles and bicycles due to roads being blocked by fallen buildings. In Bangkok, emergency crews continue to search through the ruins of the collapsed high-rise building. The structure, once a towering landmark under construction, is now a massive pile of twisted metal and broken concrete. Dozens of workers were inside when the quake hit, and authorities fear that many did not make it out in time. Relatives of those trapped are gathered nearby, waiting anxiously for any news. Officials have confirmed fatalities, but with so many still unaccounted for, the full toll remains uncertain. Across the region, thousands have been left homeless, forced to sleep in open spaces or makeshift shelters as they wait for assistance. Food and clean water are already becoming scarce, and the risk of disease is growing as sanitation systems have been severely damaged. Aid organizations and government agencies are scrambling to respond, but the scale of the disaster is making relief efforts difficult. Political tensions in Myanmar are adding another layer of complexity to the situation. The military junta has issued statements calling for international aid, but our access to affected areas remains restricted. Some regions are still cut off entirely, with no clear picture of the damage or the number of casualties. The lack of communication and coordination is slowing down rescue and relief efforts, leaving many to fend for themselves. As night falls, power outages have left entire cities in darkness. The only sources of light come from fires burning in the rubble and the flashlights of rescue teams still searching for survivors. The coming hours will be critical. Rescuers know that the chances of survival decrease with every passing moment. With limited resources and an enormous task ahead, the people of Myanmar and Thailand are facing one of the most challenging nights in their history. It all began on January 7th, 2025. Southern California had been dealing with an unusually dry stretch, but that morning, everything shifted. Powerful Santa Ana winds swept through Los Angeles and San Diego counties, kicking off what would become one of the most destructive wildfire events in California's history. By the end of the month, 14 separate fires had burned across the region. These fires weren't just big, they were fast, hot, and impossible to control in some areas. Firefighters were up against wind gusts that reached 100 miles per hour in some spots. That's hurricane-level strength. The winds didn't just spread the fires, they tore down power lines, knocked over trees, and made it nearly impossible for ground crews to get close. On top of that, humidity levels dropped dangerously low, turning the region into a tinderbox. The conditions weren't exactly a surprise. Just a few days before the fires started, the National Weather Service had issued red flag warnings. Those warnings said it could be a particularly dangerous situation, especially in Los Angeles and Ventura counties. Forecast models were already calling for extremely critical fire weather, and those predictions turned out to be right on target. One of the first signs of trouble came earlier than most people realize. On January 1st, a small fire called the Lakman Fire broke out. It didn't do much damage, it burned only 8 acres, but it started in the exact area where the much larger Palisades fire would begin days later. That small fire was an early red flag, and it turns out it was a warning of what was coming. By January 3rd, the Storm Prediction Center was already forecasting an extremely critical fire risk for January 8th. These warnings don't come lightly. That same week, they began marking nearly every day in mid-January with at least a critical fire risk. From January 7th to 15th, Southern California had almost no break in fire danger, and that was just the beginning. By January 8th, the worst fears had started to come true. Fires were breaking out all across the southern part of the state. The two biggest fires, the Eaton Fire in Altadena and the Palisades Fire in Pacific Palisades, were already showing signs of becoming major disasters. Fueled by bone-dry vegetation, low humidity, and those intense Santa Ana winds, the flames moved faster than anyone expected. This wasn't just bad luck, it was the result of a perfect storm created over months, even years. Back in the winter before, California had experienced a period of unusually heavy rain. That led to a burst of plant growth all over the region. Grasses, shrubs, and other vegetation flourished. But then everything dried out. That green growth became kindling. Scientists later confirmed that climate change had played a huge role. According to researchers at the University of California, temperatures in 2024 had been unusually hot. Just the difference between the 2024 heat and the average temperatures since the 1980s accounted for 25% of the moisture loss that fueled the wildfires, and that estimate was considered conservative. Another analysis showed that the area was now up to 5 degrees Celsius hotter, up to 15% drier, and up to 20% windier compared to the mid-20th century. That combination made wildfires far more likely and far more dangerous, and because climate change has made California's wildfire season longer, it now overlaps with Santa Ana wind season. That overlap is exactly what happened here. The fires kept spreading. People had to move fast. Over 200,000 residents were evacuated across the region. Homes, neighborhoods, and entire hillsides were swallowed by flames. And tragically, at least 30 people lost their lives during the disaster. One of the hardest hit areas was Malibu's Carbon Beach, also known as Billionaires Beach. Some of the richest people in California lost their homes in a matter of hours. Fires don't care how big or expensive a house is. When the wind is blowing that hard and the vegetation is that dry, there's not much anyone can do to stop it. By the end of the month, the wildfires had burned more than 57,000 acres and destroyed over 18,000 homes and structures. The total damage was estimated between $250 and $275 billion. That made the Eaton and Palisades fires likely the second and third most destructive fires in California history. Fire departments from all over the state responded. Cal Fire, along with local crews, worked around the clock. Tactical aircraft dropped fire retardant from above, while ground teams battled the flames directly. Still, it took until January 31st to fully contain the two largest fires. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, the city's fire department was already under pressure. Their budget had been cut by over $17 million just a few months earlier. That meant fewer hours for training, less brush inspection, and less equipment available. Even though they later received some added funding, that early budget cut made it harder to prepare for a disaster like this. To make things worse, fire departments all across the country were dealing with long delays in getting new vehicles. Prices had gone up, and supply chain issues meant departments were waiting months or even years for new trucks. All of this combined made firefighting efforts during these wildfires even more difficult. Another major problem was how older neighborhoods were built. Fire scientists pointed out that in places like the Palisades, most of the homes had been built in the 1950s and 60s. Back then, there weren't strict rules about fire-resistant materials, so you had wood frame houses, thick vegetation, and homes built close together, basically the perfect recipe for one house fire to spread to the next. In newer neighborhoods, California has building codes that require homes in fire zones to be made with materials that are less likely to burn. But those rules don't apply to homes built before the codes were put in place. That's one of the reasons why the fires spread so fast in certain areas. The electric grid also played a role. Some experts said the grid in Los Angeles was only designed to handle wind speeds up to 56 miles per hour. That's way below what actually happened. In some places, gusts hit 100 miles per hour. Utility companies didn't have a system to shut off power in high-risk urban areas, which might have prevented some fires from starting when power lines fell. And then there's the issue of homelessness. According to past reports, more than half of the fires the Los Angeles Fire Department responds to are connected to homeless encampments. It's not always intentional. Many start from cooking or trying to stay warm, but in dry conditions like these, a single spark near a tent can become a wildfire. Despite everything, local organizations stepped in to help. Groups like the Michael Spicen Found Animals Foundation and the Better Neighbor Project started collecting donations and helping families who had lost their homes. It was a reminder that in the face of disaster, people still come together. By the time the fires were fully contained at the end of January, Southern California had been through one of its toughest months in recent memory. 14 wildfires had swept through neighborhoods, hillsides, and forests. Over 57,000 acres had burned. More than 18,000 homes and buildings were gone, and over 200,000 people had been forced to leave everything behind. The fires showed just how much the climate has changed. From strong rains that create more fuel to longer dry seasons and higher temperatures, every part of the environment now seems primed for wildfires. Scientists have warned that these events aren't going to be rare anymore. In fact, they're becoming the new normal. Wind speeds are getting more intense. Vegetation is growing faster, then drying out quicker. Controlled burns, which help reduce fuel, are harder to schedule because there are fewer safe days to do them. And even though we have more advanced tools and forecasts than ever, fires like these move so fast, even the best teams struggle to keep up. The January 2025 wildfires were a wake-up call, a reminder that big disasters don't always start with explosions or earthquakes. Sometimes it's just one spark, a gust of wind, and a hillside covered in dry brush. And when all those things come together, the results can be devastating. As California continues to recover, the questions remain. How do we adapt? How do we build smarter? And how do we prepare for what's clearly becoming a longer, more dangerous fire season? Only time will tell, but for now, one thing is clear. This wasn't just another fire season. This was a warning. Tornadoes have been making headlines in 2025 with an alarming trend of increased frequency and intensity. Understanding why so many tornadoes have occurred this year requires a look into the atmospheric conditions that foster their development. Tornadoes form when specific weather elements align. Warm, moist air near the ground meets cooler, dry air above, creating instability. When this instability combines with wind patterns that change direction and speed with height, a phenomenon known as wind shear, it sets the stage for rotating thunderstorms called supercells. Within these supercells, under the right conditions, tornadoes can develop. In 2025, the United States has experienced an unusually warm and wet spring. The Old Farmer's Almanac predicted above-average temperatures and increased rainfall for much of the country. particularly in the deep south. These conditions contribute to the atmospheric instability necessary for severe thunderstorms and consequently tornadoes. Moreover, the Gulf of Mexico has been supplying abundant moisture to the central and southern regions of the U.S., enhancing the development of thunderstorms. The combination of warm, moist air from the Gulf and cooler air masses moving in from the north creates the perfect environment for a tornado formation. Understanding these factors helps explain the surge in tornado activity this year. However, the specific outbreaks and their impacts provide a clearer picture of the situation. In the next part, we'll delve into the major tornado outbreaks of 2025, examining their size, damage, and the communities affected. In the early months of 2025, the United States has experienced a series of devastating tornado outbreaks, each leaving a significant mark on the communities they struck. These events have underscored the volatile nature of this year's weather patterns and the profound impact on affected regions. On March 14th, a powerful storm system initiated a multi-day tornado outbreak across the central United States. The town of Franklin, Arkansas bore the brunt of an EF4 tornado, characterized by winds exceeding 166 miles per hour. This violent twister caused extensive destruction to homes and infrastructure, leading to multiple fatalities. The same day, Diaz, Arkansas experienced a similar EF4 tornado, compounding the devastation in the region. These tornadoes were part of a larger system that produced numerous significant tornadoes across several states. In the aftermath of the mid-March outbreak, communities like Cave City, Arkansas began the arduous process of recovery. An EF3 tornado had torn through the town with winds reaching 165 miles per hour, causing substantial damage. By March 31st, progress was evident as residents and volunteers worked tirelessly to clear debris and rebuild. The resilience displayed by these communities highlighted their determination to recover and prepare for future severe weather events. As April commenced, another formidable storm system swept through the southern and midwestern United States. On April 2nd, Owasso, Oklahoma, was struck by a tornado around 6:40 a.m., resulting in significant roof damage to homes, downed power lines, and uprooted trees. Fortunately, no injuries were reported, but the structural damage was considerable. Later that day, a large multiple vortex wedge tornado with wind speeds nearing 200 miles per hour carved a path of destruction near Lake City, Arkansas. This tornado prompted a rare tornado emergency, the highest level of alert as it approached densely populated areas. Approximately 40,000 residents were left without power, and at least 24 homes in Monette and Lake City sustained significant damage. 7 individuals were injured, underscoring the tornado's severity. The same storm system continued its destructive path into Missouri and Tennessee. In Missouri, the towns of Advance and Delta faced significant damage, with reports of destroyed homes and infrastructure. In Tennessee, Selmer was directly hit by a significant tornado in the early hours of April 3rd, leading to widespread destruction and prompting emergency response efforts. These events resulted in multiple fatalities and injuries across the affected states. The cumulative effect of these tornadoes has been profound. Beyond the tragic loss of life, thousands of homes have been damaged or destroyed, and critical infrastructure has been compromised. Power outages affected hundreds of thousands, and emergency services were stretched thin responding to the widespread devastation. In response, state and federal agencies mobilized resources to assist in recovery and provide aid to displaced residents. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, coordinated with local authorities to facilitate relief efforts, emphasizing the importance of preparedness and resilience in the face of such natural disasters. These consecutive tornado outbreaks in 2025 have highlighted the increasing volatility of weather patterns and the critical need for enhanced forecasting, early warning systems, and community preparedness to mitigate the impact of such devastating events. The series of destructive tornado outbreaks this year has raised questions about why so many have occurred in such a short time. Scientists and meteorologists have closely analyzed the atmospheric conditions leading to these storms, looking at how shifts in weather patterns have contributed to the severe outbreaks. One of the biggest factors influencing the high number of tornadoes this year has been the unusually strong jet stream activity. The jet stream, a fast-moving ribbon of air high in the atmosphere, plays a key role in storm formation. This year, this current has been positioned in a way that has repeatedly allowed warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico to collide with cold, dry air from the north. This interaction has created ideal conditions for powerful thunderstorms, which are the foundation for tornado formation. Additionally, scientists have observed a persistent La Niña pattern in the Pacific Ocean, which has influenced weather conditions across North America. La Niña typically leads to cooler ocean temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific, affecting atmospheric circulation patterns. This can enhance storm activity in the central United States by increasing instability in the atmosphere. In past years, with strong La Niña phases, tornado seasons have been more active than average, and 2025 has followed that pattern. Another significant factor is the unusually warm Gulf of Mexico waters. The sea surface temperatures in early 2025 have been among the highest recorded for this time of year. Warm ocean water leads to increased evaporation, sending more moisture into the atmosphere. When this warm, humid air moves northward and interacts with frontal boundaries and low-pressure systems, it fuels severe thunderstorms. These conditions have contributed to the repeated outbreaks of tornadoes across multiple states. For a tornado to develop, there must be a combination of wind shear and instability. Wind shear refers to changes in wind speed and direction at different levels of the atmosphere. In 2025, wind shear has been particularly strong in tornado-prone regions, meaning that thunderstorms have had the right conditions to rotate and become supercells, the type of storm most likely to produce tornadoes. Atmospheric instability is another essential ingredient. Instability occurs when warm air near the surface rises quickly into cooler air above, causing strong updrafts. This year, the atmosphere has been highly unstable due to strong temperature contrast between air masses. In some of the most damaging tornadoes, the instability was extreme, with temperature differences exceeding 30 degrees between the surface and the upper atmosphere. Traditionally, the central United States, including states like Kansas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska, has been known as Tornado Alley because of its frequent tornado activity. However, recent years have shown an eastward shift, with more tornadoes occurring in states like Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. This trend has continued in 2025, with some of the worst tornadoes occurring in the southeastern states. This shift is partly due to changes in climate patterns and the increasing presence of warm, moist air further east. The Central Plains still experience tornadoes, but the frequency of severe storms in the Mississippi Valley and Deep South has increased. The combination of warm Gulf moisture, strong wind shear, and an active jet stream has made these regions especially vulnerable. Although it is still early in the year, 2025 is already on track to be one of the most active tornado seasons in recent history. Compared to previous years, the number of tornadoes recorded so far is significantly higher than average. Meteorologists have compared the start of this year to other highly active years, such as 2011, when a record number of tornadoes occurred across the United States, including the catastrophic outbreak in late April of that year. Some similarities exist, including the presence of a strong La Niña pattern and an active jet stream. However, 2025 has also introduced new factors, such as the exceptionally warm Gulf of Mexico, which has intensified storms even further. As the peak tornado season continues, forecasters are closely watching whether these conditions will persist. If the jet stream remains in a favorable position and the Gulf continues to supply warm, moist air, the heightened tornado activity could continue into late spring and early summer. Scientists are also studying how climate trends may be influencing tornado behavior. While no direct link has been proven between climate change and increased tornadoes, some evidence suggests that a warming climate can contribute to more extreme weather conditions. This includes stronger thunderstorms, more intense rainfall, and possibly changes in tornado frequency and distribution. With multiple severe outbreaks already recorded in 2025, experts are urging communities in tornado-prone regions to stay prepared. Advances in forecasting and early warning systems have helped save lives, but the unpredictability of tornadoes remains a major challenge. Understanding why this year has been so active is a crucial step in improving future preparedness and response efforts. The record-breaking tornado outbreaks of spring 2025 have left lasting effects on the communities they struck. From destroyed homes and businesses to loss of life, the impact has been devastating. As meteorologists continue to analyze this year's severe weather patterns, emergency responders and government agencies are working to improve preparedness and recovery efforts. The destruction caused by the tornadoes of 2025 has been severe, with entire neighborhoods flattened and thousands of residents displaced. Some towns have suffered multiple tornado strikes in a short period, making recovery even more difficult. The cost of rebuilding is expected to be in the billions, with federal and state emergency funds being allocated to assist those affected. Insurance claims have skyrocketed, and many families face long-term financial hardships due to property losses. In addition to physical damage, the emotional toll on survivors has been significant. Many people who lived through these tornadoes have described the fear and trauma of losing everything in a matter of seconds. Disaster relief organizations have reported a sharp increase in mental health support requests from affected communities, highlighting the need for ongoing psychological assistance in the aftermath of such devastating storms. One key area of focus following this year's deadly tornadoes has been improving early warning systems and emergency response strategies. Although tornado warnings have become more accurate in recent years, some storms this year formed and intensified so rapidly that people had little time to react. This has prompted discussions on how to enhance radar technology and warning communication methods. Mobile alerts and sirens remain critical tools in notifying people of approaching tornadoes. However, in some cases this year, sirens failed due to power outages or technical issues, leading to tragic consequences. Emergency officials are now pushing for increased funding to modernize alert systems and ensure they remain operational during severe weather. Another major focus has been improving public awareness of tornado safety measures. Some tornadoes in 2025 struck areas that do not typically experience such strong storms, catching many residents unprepared. In response, meteorologists and emergency management agencies are working on new public education campaigns to teach people how to take immediate action when a tornado warning is issued. The unprecedented number of tornadoes this year has also renewed discussions on how to make buildings and infrastructure more resistant to storm damage. Some of the most destructive tornadoes of this year have leveled entire towns, leaving only the strongest structures standing. Engineers and city planners are now exploring ways to reinforce homes, schools, and public buildings to better withstand future storms. One proposed solution is implementing stronger building codes in tornado-prone areas. This could include requiring homes to have reinforced safe rooms, impact-resistant windows, and stronger roof anchoring systems. In areas that were repeatedly hit by tornadoes this year, officials are considering whether new zoning regulations should be introduced to limit construction in high-risk zones. Underground storm shelters have also gained renewed attention. While they are common in some parts of the United States, many communities lack access to them. Some states are now considering incentives for homeowners to install storm shelters, as well as funding for public shelters that can accommodate larger populations. Scientists continue to study whether long-term climate trends are playing a role in the increasing tornado activity seen this year. While tornadoes have always been a part of North America's weather patterns, this year's outbreaks have raised concerns about potential shifts in where and when they occur. One emerging area of research focuses on the warming climate's impact on atmospheric instability. Some studies suggest that rising global temperatures could lead to more frequent and intense thunderstorms, which could in turn produce more tornadoes. However, other factors such as wind shear and jet stream patterns also play a role, making it difficult to predict exactly how tornado activity may change in the coming years. Meteorologists are also working on improving long-range forecasting methods to better predict when conditions will be favorable for severe weather outbreaks. Advances in computer modeling have allowed scientists to identify atmospheric patterns that may indicate an increased risk of tornadoes weeks in advance. If these methods continue to improve, they could help communities better prepare for severe tornado seasons in the future. The tornado outbreaks of 2025 have been some of the most intense and widespread in recent history. From the deadly storms in March to the ongoing destruction in April, this year has demonstrated the devastating power of nature. As recovery efforts continue, there is a strong focus on improving tornado preparedness, strengthening building codes, and advancing weather forecasting technology. For those living in tornado-prone areas, staying informed and prepared remains the best defense against these violent storms. Scientists, emergency responders, and government officials are all working together to understand why this year has been so active and to find ways to reduce the damage caused by future tornadoes. While no one can stop tornadoes from forming, the lessons learned from this year will play a crucial role in helping communities better withstand and recover from future outbreaks.